Why do we compare ourselves to others? It's a natural question, and most people assume it's simply a byproduct of human nature. But beneath the surface, there's a deeper mechanism at work, a silent craving for validation. When we look at someone else's success, someone else's confidence, someone else's lifestyle, we're not just observing. We're questioning ourselves. We're asking, am I enough? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And when we don't have a strong sense of why we do what we do, that question begins to haunt us. It eats away at our focus and makes us doubt our own path. At the heart of comparison is the absence of internal clarity. When people don't know what drives them, they tend to borrow meaning from others. They use someone else's scoreboard to measure their worth. It could be followers on social media, cars in the driveway, degrees on the wall, or a title on a business card. These things become the compass for their value, and when we rely on someone else's compass, we stop navigating our own life. We drift into roles and routines that don't belong to us. And even when we achieve success by society's standards, we often feel a strange emptiness. That emptiness comes from the disconnect between what we do and why we do it. The real antidote to comparison is not motivation, it's clarity. Clarity about your own values, clarity about your vision, clarity about your mission. Once you know what you're trying to build, you stop being distracted by what others are building. You understand that their journey, no matter how glamorous, isn't relevant to yours. A person building a treehouse and a person building a skyscraper might both use ladders, but their blueprints are different. Their goals are different. Their timelines are different, and so is their purpose. The mistake we make is assuming that someone else's progress somehow diminishes our own. It doesn't. Their journey has nothing to do with the value of yours. But you can only believe that when your own purpose is clear. And it's not always about career or goals. It's about the deeper why, behind how you live your life. Are you waking up each morning just to chase a paycheck? Or are you trying to build something that reflects your values? Are you spending time with people who inspire you or people who drain you? Are you doing what you believe in or what others expect of you? These are questions that only become important when you start turning your attention inward instead of outward. And that inward shift, that movement from seeking validation to discovering purpose, is the beginning of focus. When your attention is locked on your why, your energy changes. You no longer need permission to grow. You stop looking for likes and start looking for alignment. You stop competing for attention and start cultivating direction. You become more intentional, more centered, and more resilient. Because comparison is fragile. It's based on the assumption that your value can rise or fall depending on what someone else is doing. But purpose is grounded. It doesn't shift with trends. It doesn't depend on praise. It doesn't need applause. Purpose is enough on its own. And here's the irony. When you focus on your own why, people start noticing you more. They see that you're not running the same race. You're not chasing trends. You're not trying to keep up. You're trying to build something real. And that authenticity is magnetic. It draws the right people, the right opportunities, and the right outcomes. But you don't get there by accident. You get there by making a decision. The decision to stop looking sideways and start looking inward. When you're constantly looking sideways, it's impossible to move forward. It's like trying to drive a car while staring out the passenger window. You might be moving, but you have no control over where you're going. In today's hyper-connected world, where people broadcast the best parts of their lives in high definition, it has become easier than ever to get caught up in the illusion of someone else's success. We scroll, we observe, and without realizing it, we compare. But comparison isn't harmless. It's a slow and silent killer of confidence, creativity, and clarity. Looking sideways is more than just watching what others are doing. It's giving your energy to things that don't move you closer to who you're meant to be. Every second spent analyzing someone else's life is a second not spent improving your own. And it's not just time you're wasting, it's mental focus. Focus is one of the most valuable assets you have. It's what allows you to build, to improve, to create. But when your mind is filled with judgment, envy, or doubt sparked by comparison, that focus gets fractured. Your energy scatters, your direction blurs, and your progress stalls. And what's worse is that most of what we're comparing ourselves to isn't even real. We're comparing our behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's highlight reel. The smiles, the trophies, the moments of glory, these are carefully curated snapshots. But our struggles, our late nights, our failures, and our doubts, those never make it to the screen. So we measure ourselves against illusions and then wonder why we feel inadequate. It's not because we're not doing enough. It's because we're comparing the full story of our lives to a single edited scene of someone else's. The truth is, every time you look sideways, you lose momentum. You start second, guessing your path. You wonder if you're going fast enough, doing enough, achieving enough. But who set that standard? Who decided what enough even looks like? The more you try to match someone else's speed, the more you drift from your own rhythm. And your rhythm matters. Everyone has a natural pace, a unique timing, a personal journey. Trying to copy someone else's route is like planting an oak tree and expecting it to bloom like a rose. They were never meant to grow the same way, and neither are you. What we often fail to see is that distraction isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like admiration. Sometimes it looks like harmless curiosity, but it becomes toxic when it turns into self-doubt. When watching others leads to questioning yourself, that's when looking sideways becomes dangerous. It feeds a belief that you're behind, that you're not good enough, that you're somehow lacking. But you're not behind. You're just running a different race. And success is not a singular path with one destination. It's a deeply personal journey defined by your values, your vision, and your growth. You don't need to outshine anyone else to prove your worth. You don't need to be louder, richer, faster, or more impressive to be valuable. What matters most isn't what you achieve in comparison to others. It's how aligned your actions are with your purpose. That's the real scorecard. And the more you focus on that, the less interest you become in distractions. You stop chasing approval. You stop mimicking trends. You start listening to your own voice, your own instincts, your own calling. When you stop looking sideways, something powerful happens. You begin to feel free. Free from the pressure to impress. Free from the need to compete. Free from the anxiety that you're falling behind. Because you realize you were never supposed to follow someone else's timeline. You were supposed to trust your own. We live in a world that's constantly trying to group us, compare us, and fit us into categories. From a young age, we're measured against benchmarks, academic performance, athletic ability, social status, career milestones. Somewhere along the way, we're conditioned to believe that success is a single blueprint, that there's one right way to live, one right age to succeed, one ideal path to follow. But that's not how life actually works. The reality is far messier, more personal, and far more unique. Your journey, your real, authentic journey, cannot and should not be compared to anyone else's. No one else has lived your life. No one else has felt your pain, survived your setbacks, or carried your dreams. No one else has your exact combination of talents, flaws, passions, and fears. And because of that, no one else can walk your path. When we forget this, we begin to measure ourselves with someone else's ruler. We adopt other people's standards. We inherit their goals. We take on expectations that were never meant for us in the first place. And when we fail to meet them, we don't just feel disappointed, we feel lost. The danger of not owning your own journey is that you start living a life that's not yours. You chase things because they look good on someone else, not because they feel right for you. You say yes to opportunities that don't align with your values simply because others see them as prestigious. You stay in relationships, jobs, or lifestyles that drain you just because they make sense on paper. But life isn't lived on paper. Life is lived in the gut. It's lived in your quiet moments of doubt, in your hidden strengths, and in the daily choices that reflect who you really are. When you compare your journey to someone else's, you rob yourself of the opportunity to learn from your own path. Every failure you've experienced holds a lesson tailored specifically for you. Every delay, every detour, every unexpected hardship, it all plays a role in shaping who you're becoming. If you try to skip steps or replicate someone else's shortcut, you miss the transformation. And transformation, not imitation, is what leads to growth. The process is the point. The mistakes, the uncertainty, the awkward stages, they are not detours from your journey. They are your journey. It takes courage to walk your own path, especially when it doesn't look like anyone else's. When people question your choices, when progress is slower than expected, when it feels like everyone else is racing ahead while you're stuck in place. But what you must remember is that your timeline isn't broken, it's custom built. Just because your growth doesn't fit someone else's mold doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're building something original, something real, something that actually matters to you. And this isn't just about big life decisions like careers or relationships. It's about the everyday mindset of honoring your own truth. It's about not apologizing for needing rest when others glorify hustle. It's about choosing depth over speed. It's about making decisions from your values, not from your fears. And that kind of self-trust isn't built by accident. It's built by listening, really listening to your own inner compass instead of the noise outside. Every person you admire has had to make this choice at some point, the choice to stay true to their own path, even when it was hard, lonely, or uncertain. The people who stand out, the people who live with purpose, are the ones who stopped trying to copy the world and started trying to contribute to it. They realize that there's no power in being a second-rate version of someone else, but there's incredible power in being a first-rate version of yourself. And that power doesn't come from imitation. It comes from alignment. Alignment with who you are, what you believe, and why you're here. We've been taught to chase perfection. It's embedded into how we're graded, how we're rewarded, and how we measure success. But perfection isn't just unrealistic. It's paralyzing. It convinces us that if something isn't flawless, it isn't worth doing. It creates a mindset where failure is unacceptable and mistakes are a sign of weakness. But here's the truth. Perfection is a myth, and chasing it keeps us from ever starting. It keeps us stuck in our heads, afraid to act, waiting for the ideal conditions that never come. And while we're waiting, life is passing by. Progress, on the other hand, is real. Progress is measurable. Progress is what builds momentum, and momentum is what creates change. When you stop obsessing over perfection and start committing to consistent, incremental growth, something powerful happens. You begin to see yourself improving. You begin to recognize effort over outcome. You start valuing learning over looking good. And most importantly, you start building a kind of self-respect that perfection could never give you. When you focus on others, perfection becomes the standard. You see the polished versions of their work, their lives, their achievements. You see the final product, not the messy process. So you compare your in-progress life to their created masterpiece. And of course, it feels like you're falling short. But what you're missing is the journey behind their results, the late nights, the rejected ideas, the breakdowns, the pivots. Nobody shows you the 1,000 small steps it took to get to the one picture perfect moment. So when you only focus on the surface, you adopt unrealistic expectations for yourself. This is why shifting from perfection to progress is not just helpful, it's essential. Progress doesn't demand that you get everything right. It only asks that you get better. It invites you to take action, reflect, adjust, and repeat. It gives you the freedom to make mistakes because mistakes are feedback, and feedback is how we grow. Perfection shuts the door on growth because it tells us that we're only worthy when we don't fail. Progress tells us we're worthy because we're willing to try even when we fail. And there's something else about progress that's easy to overlook. It builds resilience. Every time you choose to keep going, even when things aren't perfect, you teach yourself that you can endure. You develop grit. You build patience. You learn how to pivot instead of quit. And those are the qualities that actually move you forward. Not flawless execution, but the willingness to keep showing up. In a world obsessed with outcomes, progress teaches you to fall in love with the process. It teaches you to ask better questions. Not did I win, but did I grow? Not but did it move me forward? Not was it perfect, but was it honest? Because honesty is what creates connection. Honesty is what invites others in. Perfection creates distance. It puts up a wall. But progress builds bridges. It reminds people that they're not alone in their imperfections. And neither are you. The people who truly grow, the ones who make an impact, the ones who live with meaning, are rarely the ones who look perfect from the outside. They're the ones who chose to begin before they were ready. They're the ones who kept showing up even when it was messy. They're the ones who realized that action beats analysis. That 1% better today matters more than 100% someday. And that progress is not a backup plan when perfection fails. It's the actual path to excellence. Perfection is about appearance. Progress is about substance. Perfection impresses for a moment. Progress transforms for a lifetime. And when you commit to progress, daily, deliberately, unapologetically, you start building something real, something sustainable, something deeply fulfilling. We live in a time where a single tap of a screen can bring us the approval of hundreds or the silence of indifference. Social media has created a world where validation is no longer internal but external, measured by likes, shares, and comments. What was once a tool for connection has quietly become a mirror we hold up to our worth. And every time we post something, we look into that mirror hoping to see value reflected back. But when your self-worth becomes tied to a number, you're no longer creating for fulfillment. You're performing for applause. The most dangerous part, it feels good. That hit of dopamine when you see a notification. That tiny thrill when your content gets traction. That sense of being seen, appreciated, recognized. But like any high, it fades. And when it does, you're left chasing it again. You start curating more carefully, editing more aggressively, overthinking your every word and image to make sure it lands the right way. You stop expressing who you really are, and instead begin projecting what you think people want to see. And in doing so, you lose touch with your own voice. The trap here isn't just that social media distracts you, it's that it distorts your compass. You start measuring success not by progress, but by popularity. You begin to prioritize perception over purpose. And when you do that, you're no longer living for yourself. You're living to be seen. You're no longer driven by your values. You're driven by validation. And that's a fragile way to live. Because the moment the attention fades, you start questioning yourself. Was I ever good enough? Did I matter if no one noticed? But those questions only arise when your confidence is built on something that was never designed to be stable. Social media is not the enemy. It's a tool. And like any tool, its impact depends on how you use it. But when it becomes a scoreboard for your self-esteem, it begins to erode your authenticity. It trains you to seek feedback before you trust your own instincts. It convinces you that if something doesn't get engagement, it wasn't worthwhile. And that mindset is toxic. Because some of the most meaningful, life-changing things you'll ever do won't be visible to anyone. The nights you push through fear, the quiet choices to keep going, the small victories no one sees, these things matter deeply. But social media doesn't reward that kind of growth. It doesn't clap for discipline or consistency or integrity when no one's watching. What makes this even harder is that we're constantly exposed to the highlight reels of others. Not only are we seeking validation, but we're also comparing the response we get to the responses others receive. If someone else's content performs better, we assume they're doing life better. We start to feel behind, insufficient, invisible. And that illusion creates a cycle of insecurity. But what we forget is that people show what they want you to see. You see their curated joy, not their private battles. Their filtered smiles, not their unfiltered pain. So we keep chasing a version of life that may not even be real. And in doing so, we drift further from our own truth. To break this cycle, you have to make a fundamental shift. From seeking validation to practicing self-affirmation. From performing to expressing. From asking, will they like this? To asking, does this reflect who I am? Because when your actions align with your values, the need for applause diminishes. You're no longer waiting for others to tell you that you're enough. You know it. You believe it, and you live from that place. You don't have to delete your accounts or disappear from the digital world, but you do have to reclaim your power within it. Use your platforms. Don't let them use you. Share from allness, not from need. Create without attachment. And above all, remember that the most important validation you'll ever receive is the kind you give yourself. We often talk about self-respect, like it's something to be earned from the outside in, as if it arrives only after we accomplish something impressive or gain the approval of others. But true self-respect doesn't come from achievement. It comes from awareness. Not just awareness of what you're good at, but awareness of who you are, what you value, what you need, and what you will no longer tolerate. And this kind of self-awareness isn't something that shows up by accident. It's built intentionally. It requires stillness, honesty, and the courage to look within, even when you don't like everything you see. When you focus too much on others, you lose that connection to yourself. You become reactive. You're constantly adjusting to meet expectations, chasing relevance, or managing perception. And with each adjustment, you drift further away from your center. You start living someone else's version of success. You mimic other people's values. You say yes when you mean no. You try to fit in instead of standing out. And eventually, you wake up one day feeling empty. not because you haven't done enough, but because you've abandoned who you are in the process of trying to be accepted. Self-awareness is the antidote to this kind of identity erosion. It's the act of turning inward and asking better questions. What drives me? What drains me? What do I believe in, even when it's unpopular? What kind of life do I want to build, and why? These aren't surface-level questions. They take time to answer. They require discomfort. But in answering them, you begin to align your life with your truth. And that alignment is where self-respect begins to grow. Self-respect is not about ego. It's not about thinking you're better than others. It's about recognizing your own boundaries and honoring them. It's about treating yourself with the same dignity and compassion that you extend to the people you care about. It's about not abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And here's the thing. When you're deeply self-aware, you stop needing other people to validate your worth. You stop seeking their permission to live your truth because you know who you are. You know what matters, and you're willing to stand by it even when it's inconvenient. The path to self-awareness isn't glamorous. It's not the kind of thing that wins applause. It often happens in silence. In the moments when no one is watching and you're faced with a choice between who you've been and who you want to become. It happens when you catch yourself making excuses and decide to take ownership instead, when you feel fear and move forward anyway, when you tell the truth even though it's easier to lie. These small acts of integrity build a foundation of self-respect that no amount of external praise can replicate. Focusing on others might help you win approval, but focusing on yourself builds identity. And identity, a strong, grounded sense of who you are, is what gives you resilience in uncertain times. When the world changes, when people judge you, when plans fall apart, you won't collapse with them because you're not rooted in their opinions. You're rooted in your own truth. And from that place, you can make decisions that are aligned, not reactive. You can lead, not follow. You can respond, not conform. One of the most overlooked benefits of self-awareness is clarity. When you're clear on your values, you stop wasting time chasing things that don't matter. You stop overcommitting. You stop engaging in drama. You stop comparing yourself to people who aren't even playing the same game. And in that space, you find something most people are missing: peace. Not because life becomes easy, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. And this is what so many people are secretly looking for, not just success, but self-respect. Not just recognition, but real grounded confidence. Not just a life that looks good, but a life that feels right. And that begins always with awareness. There's a silent thief that robs more dreams than failure ever could. And that thief is comparison. It's subtle, it's seductive, and it's everywhere. You scroll through your feed, watch others shine, and without realizing it, you start measuring yourself against people you barely know. You look at their highlight reels and question your entire journey. It begins innocently enough. I wonder how they did that. I should be further along. Why not me? But over time, those thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs become chains. Chains that stifle your creativity, your voice, and your courage to act. When you compare yourself to others, you disconnect from your unique contribution. You start to believe there's only one way to succeed. Their way. You start to think that if someone else is ahead, you're behind. That if someone else is winning, you must be losing. And in that scarcity mindset, your own ideas begin to feel small. Your confidence shrinks. Your willingness to try diminishes. You start editing yourself before you even begin. You abandon your original thoughts in favor of what's already popular, proven, accepted. And that's how your voice gets lost in the noise. But the truth is, creativity doesn't thrive in a room full of comparisons. It thrives in environments of authenticity and safety, where your ideas don't have to be the best, they just have to be yours. Where trying something new matters more than impressing others. Where you're allowed to explore, to experiment, to fail forward. And that kind of freedom only comes when you stop measuring your worth against someone else's success. Because every time you compare, you rob yourself of the permission to be original. Comparison also kills courage. You might have an idea that excites you, a business, a book, a bold move, but the moment you look around and see someone else doing it better, faster, louder, you begin to shrink back. What's the point? Who am I to try? And just like that, you let fear dress up as logic. You let doubt silence possibility. You forget that the people you admire also started with messy drafts and certain steps and unanswered questions. You forget that courage isn't about being the best. It's about being brave enough to show up, especially when you don't feel ready. The real danger of comparison is not just that it discourages you, it distracts you. It takes your eyes off your own path. It keeps you focused on others when you should be focused on yourself. And when your attention is divided, your energy is diluted. You're not building anything, you're just observing. You're not creating, you're consuming. You're not growing, you're reacting. And that's not where fulfillment lies. Fulfillment comes from progress, from purpose, from doing the hard, meaningful work that only you can do. And here's something most people forget. You don't have their story. You don't know their full journey. You see the result, not the process. You see the success, not the struggle. You compare your behind, the scenes to their front stage, and then wonder why you feel like you don't measure up. But life isn't a synchronized race, it's a solo climb. And the only person you need to beat is the person you were yesterday. So if you want to protect your creativity, you have to protect your focus. That means limiting the noise. That means creating before you consume. That means spending more time in your craft than in your comments. And most importantly, it means honoring your journey, even when it doesn't look like anyone else's. Because your uniqueness is not a weakness, it's your advantage. Your originality is not a liability, it's your leverage. but you'll never access it if you're too busy imitating what's already been done. Every great idea was once doubted, every bold step was once scary, and every creative breakthrough required the courage to trust something unproven. That's what comparison steals, not just your confidence, but your voice. And your voice matters. Your work matters. Your story matters. But only if you choose to focus on your path long enough to bring it to life. When people think of success, they often picture something external, a title, a trophy, a certain number in a bank account, or an audience applauding your achievements. But the greatest victories in life are the ones no one else can see. They are internal. They happen in silence without celebration. They're the moments you choose growth over comfort, discipline over ease, truth over approval. These are not the victories that make headlines, but they're the ones that shape character. And the most powerful journey you will ever take isn't out there in the world, but deep within yourself. The journey inward is hard. It requires something most people avoid: honesty. The kind of honesty that makes you sit with your flaws without rushing to cover them up. That forces you to confront your insecurities, your fears, your blind spots. And that doesn't happen when you're constantly watching what everyone else is doing. It happens when you shut out the noise, sit in solitude, and ask yourself the deeper questions. What am I running from? What do I need to heal? What kind of person do I want to become? These questions don't have easy answers, but they lead to real transformation. There's no shortcut to this work. It's not glamorous. It won't always feel good. It's easier to distract yourself with business, with drama, with other people's lives. It's easier to fixate on how someone else is doing, where they're going, how far they've come. But every minute you spend obsessing over someone else's life is a minute you're not investing in your own. The time you spend comparing is time you could spend becoming. And becoming is what this journey is really about. Not just achieving more, but becoming more whole, more grounded, more true to yourself. This inward journey reveals what you truly value, what matters to you beyond what the world rewards. It teaches you to let go of old identities that no longer serve you, the ones built on fear, on survival, on trying to fit in. It challenges the lies you've been telling yourself. I'm not good enough. I'll never change. This is just the way I am, but. And instead, it invites you to write a new narrative, one built on ownership, one rooted in possibility, one where your past doesn't define your future unless you allow it to. You'll know you're growing not by how much you gain, but by how much you release. The need to be liked, the addiction to validation, the pressure to impress. You'll know you're evolving when your peace becomes more important than proving a point, when your integrity outweighs your image, when your values guide your choices more than your fears do. That's real progress. That's maturity. And it's only possible when you stop looking outward for direction and start looking inward for clarity. The inward journey also gives you something rare in today's world: stability. When your self-worth is rooted in your own understanding of who you are, you're not easily shaken. You're not swayed by trends, opinions, or even failures. You have a core. And that core keeps you steady when life gets unpredictable, because you're not performing anymore. You're living. You're no longer trying to be everything to everyone. You're focused on being true to one person, yourself. And here's what makes this journey sacred. It never ends. You don't arrive at a finish line. You don't check a box and move on. You continue evolving, shedding layers, confronting new fears, discovering deeper truths. It's a lifelong pursuit of alignment between who you are and how you live. And each step brings you closer to freedom. Not the freedom that comes from escaping responsibilities, but the kind that comes from living without pretending, from choosing your life, not settling into someone else's, from knowing without doubt that you're exactly where you need to be, not because the world approves of it, because your soul does. When you stop focusing on others and start focusing on yourself, everything begins to change, not because the world gets easier, but because you get stronger. You stop running a race that was never meant for you. You stop chasing goals that don't align with your values. You stop living a life designed by expectation and start creating one fueled by intention. This is not a call to selfishness. It's a call to self-leadership. Because the truth is, you can't give your best to the world until you've first discovered the best within yourself. And that discovery doesn't happen by watching others. It happens when you pause, reflect, and build from the inside out. When you trade distraction for discipline, comparison for clarity, noise for purpose, you don't need to outperform anyone. You need to outgrow the version of you that stopped believing. You need to outlast the doubt that keeps whispering you're not enough. And you need to outwork the old mindset that tells you the answers are out there when they've always been in here. So commit to the path within. Focus on your progress, respect your journey, and every day show up not to impress the world, but to become the kind of person you can be proud of. Because in the end, the most meaningful success isn't about being better than others. It's about being better than you were yesterday. And that journey starts the moment you decide to focus on yourself.